Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Pelt Music Podcast. Shortly, we'll be joined by Newton Faulkner, who's currently out on his Feels Like Home tour. But before then, the usual reminders from myself, if you would, please do follow Pelt on social media. We're on Facebook at Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Pelt Music. And again, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, wherever you're watching or listening. Absolutely delighted to have Newton Faulkner with us today on the Pelt Music Podcast. As we've just touched upon offline, it is beautiful outside today. So, how has your day been?
It's been great. I was picnicking in the park with I've got a very nearly 1 year old, not quite, but just on the cusp. So it's just with him in the park most of the day, really. It's lovely.
It's amazing, especially after the year of weather we've had, because it has been pretty atrocious.
Yes. No,
So,
it's been pretty treacherous out there. But no, it's lovely.
yeah, no, got to cherish the moments, as we say. Absolutely, beautiful chaos, parenthood, as we just termed. So, yeah,
Yes.
and it's probably a good term, to be fair, as well for touring. Beautiful chaos. So,
That sounds horribly familiar, actually, yes.
absolutely. And as we talk, you're in the middle of the second leg of your Feels Like Home tour.
Yeah, it's not even, I don't know if it's a leg. I'm not quite sure how to describe it. It's the only tour I've ever done that's had a sequel. It's probably the best way of looking at it. And that's because we did it, I think, 2 years ago. And it's smaller venues, it's longer, it's got guitar workshops every afternoon. It's got like a kind of meet and greet thing after the guitar workshops. And it's just like a different style of touring to going to all the big towns, doing the kind of larger numbers, but over a much shorter space of time. I mean, that you can only do. I mean, UK max, if you're doing major cities, it's about 2 weeks,
Yeah.
really. And that's not enough gigs for me. I like gigs more than that. So I quite like doing like these kind of longer stretches. And also it has, yeah, it's just a chance to really connect with people in a way that it gets harder the bigger things get.
It absolutely does, absolutely does, and I love as well. Obviously, as you've touched on the places that you're going to see don't regularly get artists of your size coming to play. I mean, a lot of artists, even UK artists, seem to forget that the UK goes beyond the sort of certainly the big three, but even the sort of seven or eight sort of bigger cities. There's you know
Yeah.
it's great to see you out there. And is that obviously as well conscious for you as someone that loves playing shows, loves touring? Do you also love the aspect of getting out and sort of meeting new people, going to places you've not been before?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, just kind of exploring. I mean, I say exploring, obviously the days are pretty packed because between the workshops and the meet and greets and the gig, there's not. I mean, I remember on the last one if I had more than 5 minutes between something, then that I started thinking of that as a holiday. So I was like, oh, a 7 minute holiday? Great, let's have a 7 minute holiday. I just sit down and take a very deep breath before jumping back in. Because it's pretty hectic. So you don't get to see a lot of the places that you're in. A lot of the time you kind of drive. So I'll get somewhere maybe at about 2 in the afternoon, hopefully with enough time for lunch. But if there's been traffic, then that obviously just goes out the window, and you're kind of straight into setting up the gear and getting ready to do what needs doing. And it is, I mean, it is strange touring. I've never been very good at mixing it with the touristy stuff, and obviously I've been a lot of places in the world, and I haven't seen the stuff that most people would choose to see going there. But I have unloaded trucks at 3 o'clock in the morning in Tokyo and done stuff that no one would even think to do. And you see a different side of these places, and that it's kind of it's fascinating, just in a totally different way.
Yeah, I can only imagine what Tokyo at 3 in the morning is unloading a truck. That's
Depends
like.
depends what day of the week it is. Either very quiet or not in any way quiet.
But no, like you say, you get to see a different side of these places that
Yeah,
obviously general tourists won't, which is yeah, absolutely fantastic. And obviously, following the sort of same sort of tread lines of obviously getting to go to these different places that aren't always graced by artists such as yourself coming to them. Do you ever feel that the connection between you and the audiences in say, I can see you obviously going to Buxton, Southport, Harrogate. I
yeah.
mean, do you feel a different kind of connection with those to say, obviously London, Manchester? Is it obviously fans that are perhaps not just on a general night out because they get to experience this every day of the week, but actually, oh yes, this is the
Yeah,
event.
it is different. I mean, I think the crowd that I attract, and I'm incredibly lucky in this, and I don't take it for granted in any way, is I tend to get just a nice bunch of people pretty much everywhere. So even in London, which is so known for being like the standoffish, most awkward gig of the tour, that's the kind of general perception.
Yeah,
But it's just never happened to me. I think I've I think it's partly the people I attract, partly the way that I gig, which is very inclusive, and I don't think I give people an opportunity to really fight it much anymore. I think I used to give people loads of options, and now I'm like, no, you are doing this, and you're doing that, and you're doing this, and then you're doing that, and it's going to be great. And it's just this kind of thing of just pulling people out of their shells without them even really being that aware of it. And I'm incredibly kind of lucky to have these kind of very open, up for fun audiences in places where they are saturated with gigs and they do get to see a lot of stuff. And it is I haven't been overtly aware of the difference in energy. I mean, the one thing that I think you do get, so if you're doing a gig in London, no one's gonna come to the gig who doesn't know who you are. So they'll come in and they'll know all the words. They'll be like, obviously, out of everything that's happening,
yeah,
out of Spirited Away in the theatre and all these other things and everything in every cinema, I've chosen to come and see you because I want to. In much smaller towns, you do get this thing of, well, we came because you were the only thing happening.
yeah.
We know a couple of songs. We didn't even know if we'd like it, but we've had a great time. And it is this kind of slightly more haphazard energy to it.
Yeah, yeah, I can envisage that actually. Yeah, it's a really, really good point that Newton. And yeah, yeah. I live in a smallish town myself. We're lucky to have a venue that attracts a few people through, but
Mm.
still obviously not what the bigger cities would get. So yeah, I can obviously yeah attest to that. Going along to shows just because what I want to go to a show and that's all the song I'm going to
Yeah,
see.
that's the one.
So.
That's the one that's on.
And I guess it's a nice challenge for yourself as well. Does it obviously, you feel you've got to, win these people over?
Well, I'm kind of used to that. I mean, it's very, it's quite kind of festival vibes.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah,
Festival is
yeah,
always that mixture. There's like the front few rows that are the people that want to see you, and then behind that, you've got people that maybe were just in the tent because it was raining.
yeah,
Like you never know why people are there, and it is. I quite like that challenge of the mixture of keeping the people that are into you really into you while also introducing yourself to other people and yeah, it's a really fun challenge.
yeah. And speaking of kind of obviously challenges and obviously winning people over, but I want to flip it and more onto you, Newton. And
Yeah,
you love obviously touring. You're a name that is always out there on the road, which is I respect so much. And um, obviously you've been sort of active for getting on for 2 decades now. Not to make you feel old or anything, but it's
sexually or is it as an artist?
Yeah. Certainly, obviously, yeah. As an artist, you've been out
Oh,
on the road playing
yes.
shows. Yeah, I mean, I can't comment on the other one, so
No,
yeah. But yeah, I guess the question could almost translate to the other one as well.
Oh
Because
God.
I was gonna ask you, how do you keep it interesting for yourself? I know obviously just the thrill of getting up on stage and playing to a crowd is plenty, but when you are
Yeah,
out there, obviously I'm more sort of. I'm a bit of a set list geek. I love looking at set lists and what bands are
yeah.
playing, what artists are playing, and I love artists obviously that mix it up, and I feel you do a good job at that. And for you, obviously, you get up there and you're playing a show. Do you
Yeah.
ever consider that? How do I keep this? How do I keep myself interested in the shows that I'm playing?
Well, I have the added advantage of, in that particular situation, in trying to keep it interesting, that a good selection of my material is so unbelievably hard to play that you cannot get bored while doing it, because it's it's just really complicated and fiddly,
Yeah,
which is kind of does that just for yourself. And there's songs that I go into, and there's days where I'm like, oh, this is so much fun, and everything's like, oh, this is really good. And other days, like, why did I do this to myself? It's so high and then so low, and it's got 9 different polyrhythms and all this kind of just stuff. And it's really, and I think because I've had so many different setups as well, so most tours have different things. I have settled into like one thing that I consider to be kind of my core setup now, after messing around with loads of stuff for years. And I think the one reason I've settled on it is because people actually fully dance and really,
yeah,
like, it really communicates on a rhythmical level in a way that nothing I've tried before really has. Definitely not solo, because I've got a kick drum on one foot, and then it's essentially there's a thing called a junk hat. It's made by Bald Man Percussion. They make loads of stuff. They're really cool. They're in Nashville, and it's a dustbin lid, crumpled up, turned upside down, with a bit of wood with chains poked through it and other little metal bits that rattle. And it's just this. It's like the opposite of a sample, because it's so kind of visceral and real and like undeniably just there doing its
yeah,
thing. And you, even when you're not touching it, it'll just do something, but it usually does something cool. And half the time when you're just before you go to do it, it does something you're not expecting it to do. But I mean, it sounded like it was reversed the other night on one thing. I have no idea how it was doing that. I think one of the chains was like dragging across, so it went. It's awesome. Um, but with that and the kick drum and my guitars set up the way they are, it's just such a satisfying pocket to get into. And when everything's in, you can really, really drive it. And you can make it feel like a really tight band, but like a band that can speed up and slow down, but at exactly the right degrees, because it's actually just me.
yeah,
I mean, I did like a selection of stabs that I was kind of making up as I went along. It was in a bit where the crowd were doing something, and it was a bit James Brown, a bit hit me one time. It was a bit like that, but I could see people being like, "Oh, that's really tight." But of course, it's really tight. It's just me. It's my limbs. I can make them do things at the same time. But there's something about this kind of very small setup in essence. Like it's tiny. There's not a lot to it, but it just seems to translate in a way that other things that I've done, like I've tried kind of quite complex looping setups, and I've been very lucky. I've worked with some amazing people. Headrush lent me this massive board, which is awesomely, like, it's so clever. It does so much stuff. But I think the way that I play, I struggled a bit with it, not on a technical level, but just on like a playing level, to to make it really kind of swing and feel really good. Because I think a lot of my songs are written to be played live, and they're not kind of on the grid all the time. There's sections that speed up and sections that slow down, and it's not very kind of loop friendly, a lot of it. So if I lay down something, it doesn't feel like it wants to stay the same the whole song. And if it does, it feels like it kind of gets in the way at points. And it's, as I said, it's nothing to do with the gear. The gear's amazing. But it's just the way that I construct songs, it's not very friendly for, and at times. I think I've done some writing with it, and that's worked really well. And that's kind of why I took it out, because it was like, this kind of feels like a good time to try it. It would probably be easier to do now because obviously technology changes all the time, but with the multi-instrumental looping setup, sound checks were taking about 4 hours, that's a big chunk of the day.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of complicated, fiddly gain structure, nerd stuff.
Yeah.
To then do a gig, which is really like technically challenging because I'm looping multiple instruments, and it was kind of on the edge of going horribly wrong all the time. There was some amazing, like there were songs from that tour that if I could just on a whim be like, let's do that, that'd be awesome, just in a set, I'd definitely do it. Something like, there was a track called Killing Time that just really went somewhere that I've never managed to go before. It was really like kind of full wall of sound, like really epic. But I can't spend 5 hours sound checking for 5 minutes of music at the end of the day. But that's probably because I was overcomplicating it as well, because I wanted 3 keyboards plugged into it and an SPD and all the guitars and my voice, and it was a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, really fascinating. Yeah, to obviously the journey you've sort of gone through there to arrive at a point where you feel like you've got the optimum sort of set up, and obviously works for you,
Yeah,
works for the
but I feel
audience.
that journey is kind of the same with everything. It's the same with playing. I feel like my playing's very like economically friendly now. I feel like I can really just kind of go, and I've got loads of freedom. I can kind of make up bits, and I've got enough theory to like fill in gaps. And vocally, I'm playing all the time. I'm finding new like I found something new in my voice, like in the car on the way to a gig. I was like, that's interesting. Well, let's implement that tonight and see what it does on this. And it's like kind of like a whole new valve in my head. So I'm just constantly digging. I think that's the other reason is I never really settle for anything. I think, that's good enough. Let's just do that.
Yeah, no, it naturally feels like obviously everything's kept interesting through obviously the way you go through that journey, and yeah, absolutely yeah, fascinating, as I say. Although I won't continue and ask obviously how you keep your love life interesting. I think we'll leave that. That's probably a different type of podcast,
It's a
in all
different,
fairness.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a later night.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Put the kids to bed for that one. But obviously, you touched on as well, and I did want to just bring it up. But obviously, and I will just say now, listeners, obviously, there's still tickets available for a lot of these shows. So obviously, there'll be a link in the bio. Please do, if you're interested, jump on and come along and see Newton, because you won't regret it. And obviously, for people that are interested in a little bit more, as you say, there is the guitar workshop to start things off, and then the sort of VIP meet and greet, and obviously. I love those sort of things because it's a modernism. You didn't really get it 20 years ago. I can sort of go and do that with my heroes of the day. So the world evolves, music industry evolves, and these sort of things have
Yeah.
come in. And I just want to get your thoughts, obviously, particularly on sort of the guitar sort of workshop that you do, and
Yeah.
what you get out of that, and obviously meeting different people in different places, and obviously
Yeah.
working with them to obviously hopefully improve
Yeah, I
their
mean,
sort
what I'm doing at the moment with the guitar workshops is a massive challenge. I'm trying to kind of teach teardrop from the ground up, which is, if you're not used to that area of playing, like it's a real challenge to get your head round. And it's dealing at kind of getting both hands to kind of pull in different directions and how to make sense of that. And it's, I mean, I guess for me, I actually really enjoy teaching's really fun. It's really nice to be on that level with people and be like, yeah, so you do this, then you do that. And if you do this and do that, and then eventually you can get to this point where you can put that in. And then once you put that in, it's really easy to just add this bit. And then kind of bit by bit, you get to this point, you're like, whoa, this is a thing. I'm just saying, you're kind of slowly layer by layer building things up. And yes, it's been really kind of fascinating. And I learned things because people ask me
Yeah.
questions about certain tracks. And I'm like, that's a very good point. I should be able to just answer that off the top of my head, but to be honest, I've never thought about what my hands are doing at that point. And then I end up looking at it and I'm like, oh, oh, so that noise is the back of my thumb on this thing that I've never thought about, but I've been doing for 20 years. And yeah, because there's so many things that you just kind of naturally do. So it's really interesting when someone asks you to deconstruct something that you've
Yeah.
never deconstructed. Like, oh, so this is that and that's that. And my foot. Oh, so it's my foot that's doing that. I never thought about that either. So it's just like totally like quite surprising. And I feel like I learned just as much as anyone else, really.
Yeah, which is again a beautiful thing. It really is, and yeah,
Yeah.
I did get the sense that it's probably something that you find really rewarding to do. Just
Yeah,
to
it's lovely. And
yeah,
especially like kind of younger people as well. People are kind of just getting into it. It's like a big boost. And yeah, I think the same at the other end. If you've been playing for ages and you've kind of plateaued, it's like such a kind of refreshing challenge.
yeah, no, absolutely. And again, a great opportunity for fans to be able to engage with you on that level. And I'm always fascinated because obviously, I say the industry does evolve, and new
Yeah.
opportunities to build communities and engage with your audience come about. And one sort of platform that I constantly find myself asking artists about is Patreon,
Oh yeah, I'm on
because
there. I'm not,
yeah.
I'm kind of there, but I'm still trying to work out the best way of doing it. They've actually added a function that I've been using more than any other, which is this kind of instant video one,
Hmm.
which I really like. That's made quite a big difference for me because it's meant I can just, like, as I'm setting up, be like, hey, I'm just setting up, I just plug this in, and it's not turning on. Great. Just stuff like that, and just really kind of keep it topped up because with what I'm wanting to do, and I think what I'll do after this tour when I've got more kind of time in one place is I've got some really good gear that I can set up to kind of stream at an incredibly high quality with that. I've got a really nice lens and really nice mics and a little it's the Gigcaster 8 from Boss that I was using that was awesome. Loads of on like inbuilt effects and you can kind of make guitars and vocals sound really good. And then I started putting the kick drum and all, like the full setup through it and I was like, "Ooh, this is really fun." But obviously half of that gear is in a car somewhere and like it's not something I can have set up all the time. So it's a bit more complicated. But yeah, I love it as a thing. I'm still trying to get my head around the best ways of using it. I mean, the people that I really like are people like kind of Ben Folds who do loads of like quite interesting, very community driven stuff on
Yeah.
there. Like he gets loads of demos and he sits down and goes through them and he talks people, I think, through his favorite records and plays some stuff as well. It's like got quite a kind of interesting layered approach, which is kind of what I'm working towards, but I'm definitely in the kind of fledgling stages because for some reason, quite stupidly, I kind of went onto it and got it up and running and then had a tiny baby, which obviously I just forgot quite how much time that absorbs.
Yeah, considerable amount of time it does, absolutely. But no, I love to see us embracing, modern ways of engaging an audience. Again,
Yeah,
25 years ago, when I was back in, college and that, the thought
yeah,
of being able to sort of communicate and engage and get insights into a band, say, I don't know, Green Day or someone like that,
yeah.
just wasn't possible, completely not
No,
possible back. Whereas now with
it's weird.
technology,
Yeah, it is
yeah,
amazing. It's kind of double-edged for me because there's a bit of that kind of like, where's like I think it's really hard to be like an enigma and be mysterious now. It's like, what do you mean? I'm just not on anything. But how do people know what's happened? Oh, that's probably why no one came, actually. Because I was being an enigma.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And there still has to be a line somewhere as well, doesn't there? Your personal life
Yeah,
still has to
it's
be a
tricky.
separate entity. Yeah.
I feel very strange about plastering the internet with my children
Yeah.
because it feels like it's not their choice. It's my choice. Like I've chosen to be
Yes.
where I am and in this situation. I think just because they're my children, I don't feel okay about it. It's not something they've chosen. It might be something that they get to a certain point. So like, I cannot believe you told everyone in the world about me pooping my pants
Yeah.
at this thing. Like it just seems, yeah, that definitely seems like a bit of a line to me.
Yeah. I'm absolutely with you on that one for sure.
Although having
Definitely.
said that, I mean, I don't think ill of anyone that does it. I just don't want to do it personally.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's people that do it, and I see it, and I'm like, oh, that's really sweet. He's like playing his kid a song, and that's nice. But at the same time, I'm not. I still don't want to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely with you on that. And yeah, no, obviously fantastic that you're on there. And obviously, listeners, again, there will be a link for everything that we talk about in
Yeah,
each
yeah. I mean,
episode.
just let me know what you want me to do, and I'll do it as soon as I'm back from this tour. I guess is probably
Yeah,
going to be the best plan. And I'll chuck in as much behind the scenes stuff as I possibly can.
yeah, no,
But it is, yeah,
yeah,
it's one of those kind of newer things for me. But
yeah,
it's an exciting prospect because
yeah.
I quite like finding odd ways of using things, stuff that you kind of wouldn't necessarily see coming. Is always like the most interesting thing to my brain.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And obviously, yeah, that's a new way of engaging with audiences. We've touched
Yeah,
on an older way already, and that's festivals. And I just wanted to
yeah,
ask you, obviously, because researching for this, I saw some great festival dates already announced for this summer. Again,
yeah. I've got some good
listeners
ones.
can.
I mean, sadly, we've had a few cancellations,
That's where I was going to go. Actually,
which is
is
worrying.
obviously,
Actually,
yeah,
I bumped into, weirdly, it's someone that booked me for a festival miles and miles away, and years ago, who's I just met walking his dog where I walk my dogs, and it was like, hey. And then he was explaining why everything's being cancelled. Well, not everything, but why there's like an increase in cancellations. And obviously, people not being able to afford tickets is obviously one thing. But then at the other end of the spectrum, they're costing up to like 4, 5 times as much to put on,
yeah,
which is where the real, so it's an absolute pinch at both ends, which
yeah,
is where the kind of trouble's coming from.
yeah.
So I don't really know how you get around that.
No, it is a difficult one. It is a difficult one, and I'll always advocate for some government support for the arts is always important. To give
Oh,
that foot up.
definitely.
But um, for obviously an artist's perspective, and
Hmm.
someone again, has sort of made your name off the back of your live shows, I believe. And obviously
Yeah.
garnering your audience through that. Obviously, festivals are such an important avenue for new bands to win
Oh,
over new
definitely.
crowds.
Well, that
Obviously,
and the like grassroots venue circuit, those are
absolutely.
kind of how you get in, and yeah, they're both having loads of issues post the C word. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they absolutely are. So, I mean, yeah, the sort of question I was obviously going to touch on really was just, how important do you feel that they are, obviously, for upcoming artists?
Oh,
Yeah,
incredibly. Yeah, I mean both of them. So festivals are a real in because those kind of early afternoon slots are up for grabs, and you can get them, and they're how you learn your craft in order of how to deal with crowds outside and in that situation. And I think what we're seeing more and more at the moment, and it kind of started a few years ago with kind of people rising very quickly from things just like other places. So basically, not kind of working the circuit and appearing. It was like people were just getting chucked out. And I remember I've seen a few kind of very young artists being given like the biggest TV show, and I'm quite tuned in to people when they're performing, because obviously I'm thinking of it from their point of view. And I've seen people appear on my television screen and be like, oh, you are terrified, and just kind of tuned into that. And I think I'm seeing more and more of that, especially at festivals, because there's people kind of just getting thrown to the top so quickly and with such kind of aggression, and then kind of having the rug pulled out from like the next year. Like, it's really brutal out there. The whole industry is pretty hard going in all directions. Obviously, there's, with every kind of layer of complication, there's ways of exploiting that and ways of making it kind of in spite of it and working with it. So I'm not saying it's kind of totally broken and impossible, but I think you have to be really inventive in how you approach it these days. But festivals and small gigs. I mean, small gigs were like totally vital to me, because I needed them all to learn to get to the point that I can do what I do now. And without years and years and years of gigs, like I don't know how you get kind of comfortable. And it's probably not the same absolutely everywhere. I'm sure if you're in maybe places like kind of Australia and Nashville, there's like more of a kind of, I think the kind of pub music scene in Australia is still kind of functioning in a way that it's not really here. And I'm sure like the way that musicians operate in places like Nashville is there's just people playing everywhere you go. Like, you go and have coffee and there's like an incredible blues band just going for it. And it's like a totally different kind of landscape. But I think we are going to have to carve out some kind of training ground for people that's actually physical. Because I think singing into your phone is one thing, but singing in front of lots of people is different. It's a different type of pressure, and it's a type of pressure that I think people are gonna have to find somewhere to practice, and I don't know where it's gonna be yet.
Yeah, definitely a challenging environment, but thankfully there's still so many great people out there that are trying to run the independent venues and the festivals. So, and obviously, God bless them,
Yeah, there's people working really hard to kind of create these spaces.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and obviously, another impact on them all was the pandemic, and I hate always talking. To be honest, I've really moved away from talking about the pandemic. But
I kind of brushed on it, and then I didn't want to say it. I said like the C word, and I said it really quietly. I was like, let's just brush over that.
Exactly. Especially over on our Discover New Music podcast. Still, a lot of the bands we talked to formed during the pandemic, so I find myself talking about it, and I wish I didn't. But I actually wanted to ask you. Obviously, you wrote you wrote a pandemic album before the pandemic, because obviously Studio Zoo and the way you recorded.
Oh, Studio Zoo was total pandemic behavior. Yeah,
exactly. And obviously you repeated it during the pandemic with obviously the interference of light. So obviously, when the pandemic hit, and obviously, everything that come with that and the shutdown of the industry, did you, where did you sort of arrive at, what, I've done this before, I can do this?
Well, I think most artists were like us, basically just making an album, isn't it? Because it's how you spend 6 months of every year. You spend 6 months making a thing and 6 months touring a thing. And you switch from being hyper social and seeing hundreds of people every day to just seeing a computer screen and pretty much no one else. And that's kind of how life works. So I think a lot of people in the music industry almost didn't notice what was going on for 6 months. And then we're suddenly like, hang on.
Yeah.
I normally see people by this point. But no, I mean, it was really tough. I mean, it was the longest I'd never done a gig for. I'd like to say I'd not done a gig for probably since I was about 15. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah. And thank God we can move on from that now.
We can. I think we're there.
We are absolutely there. And obviously, penultimate question for me is just, new music, as we're on the subject.
It is on the way.
There we go. There we go.
It's on the way, and it's going in all directions at the same time, which I've never done before. I've always kind of picked a lane and kind of dug into it. But with this, I think because it's been quite a long time since I released anything, so I've had a lot of ideas, but a lot of them have been quite spread out time-wise, and because of the time-wise, it's quite spread out stylistically. So there's some totally bonkers like production stuff that doesn't even have guitars on it. That's like just miles out there. Um, and then I also released like some tiny little folky things as well. Released something just in Australia before I went there that was just very kind of purist, um, which I kind of equally enjoyed. So I think I'm gonna do bits of absolutely everything over the next kind of year or so. We're just trying to find the right vehicle to kind of move through. But there's lots of stuff going, and there's some stuff that I've been desperate to release for months. Like I'm really like chomping at the bit because I'm like, I've got all this stuff, it's really good. But we just don't, yeah, we need the right structure to kind of go through. So at the moment there's a lot of kind of just jigsaw pieces to get in place.
Yeah, it is a big jigsaw to put into place.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, listeners, there you go. New music is on the way, and obviously the show's happening and everything else we talked about. The best way to stay up to date of any artist these days is social media. So I always give out the social handles, and they should flash up on the
Oh, thank
screen
you
on
very
YouTube
much.
as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And you make my life really, really easy because I'm pretty sure the listeners would find you without my help because you are
Yeah,
at Newton Faulkner on all the socials, except for
that
TikTok,
is,
which is at the real Newton
yeah,
Faulkner.
someone pipped me to the post.
Shocking.
This reminds me of one of my favorite things that ever happened. I've been hanging out with someone and their son. It was like a dad and his son. Was it Coachella? It's one of the big festivals. Um, and then we ended up kind of like having drinks afterwards. And as the dad left, he just said he fully like Columboed it as well. So like he was halfway out the door and he came back and went, "Hey, by the way, Google me." And then closed the door. And then I Googled him and he'd like produced Michael Jackson and just like won 24 Grammys. It was like totally like next level crazy. But yeah, you can just Google me, but
Yeah.
there's less
Yeah.
amounts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's become just a regular feature now that I give them out, and
Oh,
leads
well,
us
thank you very
normally.
much. That goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely, it does, and leads me on to the last question of the podcast. Is always the same question because
Oh,
a bit of the sort of the subjects we've touched upon, issues in the music industry over the last sort of 50 episodes of the podcast. We've touched on quite a few, and they just naturally were coming up. So eventually, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to put this question in there and just
yeah.
see where we go with it. So it's called Magic Wand, and we're going to go into fantasy land a little bit.
Okay,
So
hit me.
I'm going to give you a magic wand, and Newton, with that magic wand, you can change one thing about the music industry, but one thing only, which is where it gets quite tough. So,
Ooh.
what would you like to change about the music industry with your magic wand?
Oh, I don't know if this is one trick or like not one trick, but I would like, okay, my dream when the internet and music first kind of intermingled was that stuff would get big because it was good. Very simple conceptually,
Yeah,
but I thought if you can just put it on the internet and people can listen to it and they can tell their friends, I heard this, it was good. I thought that is a totally like level playing field. Like some guy in a cave can record something and you can be like, oh my God, that is the coolest thing I've ever heard. And that should be able to be number one. There shouldn't, it should just be like just word of mouth to the absolute max. But for me, I feel like the internet has had the polar opposite effect on music and actually kind of like narrowed the playing field even more due to how, so I'd just like to undo that. I want my dream for the internet to be realized. And I want someone in a cave on something with like one string and another guy with a Coke can just doing something awesome. And I want that to be able to be like globally accepted as awesome and win awards and stuff.
fantastic. No, I love it. That's a great answer, Newton. And it's been an absolutely fantastic chat. And obviously, yeah, all the best with the rest of the tour. I
Thank you
always
very
just chuck
much.
the final message over to the guests. So what would be your final message for listeners today?
Come see me on tour. It's really fun. I'm having a great time.
Perfect final message. No, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. I really do hope you enjoyed that chat there with Newton Faulkner. If you can, do pop along to one of the remaining shows on his Feels Like Home tour. And of course, follow Newton on social media to stay up to date with everything coming from him. You can also stay up to date with Full Pelt. We're on Facebook at Full Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. And finally, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, wherever you're watching or listening, because we'll be back very soon with another episode of the Full Pelt Music Podcast.